The Vithori had a model for everything. That is not an exaggeration. Vethor Sas, chief probability architect aboard the joint survey vessel Keth Soral, had built the array over 11 years of refinement, and it covered every accessible variable in the survey window: route density, supply corridor load, crew reaction margins, equipment failure rates, atmospheric interference bands, and 47 additional categories I couldn't have named if you'd given me an afternoon. The array ran continuous confidence intervals. It printed projections every 6 hours. It had never, in 11 years and 4 joint survey missions, posted a confidence interval below 89%. I was told all of this on my first morning aboard. I was also told, with the particular brand of courtesy that means the opposite of what it says, that my role on the assessment board was observational and coordinative, a human liaison function, non-instrumental, which was Vithori administrative language for, "You are here because the compact requires a human signature on the mission record, and we have arranged a chair for you near the door." The chair was a good chair. I'll give them that. My name is Dale O'Roon. I have been a logistics coordinator for 11 years, which is the same amount of time Vethor Sas spent building his array, though I doubt he would have found that symmetry interesting. I work without instruments, mostly. I carry a notepad. I have a particular way of looking at supply corridors: the load, the sequence, the small pressure points that don't show up in formal assessments, but that you start to feel after the first few thousand routing decisions. You learn which junctions carry more than the schematics say they do. You learn which draw sequences look clean on paper and go sideways in practice. You learn to move small things early, quietly, before the larger systems have to deal with what happens when you don't. It is not a skill that photographs well. It does not produce a confidence interval. It does not, as far as I am aware, have a name in Vithori. The array had a category for human reaction time. It had a category for human equipment ratings. It had a category for human crew density relative to supply load. What it did not have, what Vethor Sas confirmed, with some patience when I asked, was a category for human logistics intuition. He said this the way you might say there is no category for the color of luck, politely, with the faint implication that this was because intuition was not a thing that required a category. I wrote that down. I went back to my notepad. The first supply route failure hit on day 9. Corridor 7, the primary relay between the survey's forward depots and the main vessel, dropped its load tolerance by 31% inside a 4-hour window. The cause, the array determined, was a compound pressure event in the relay manifold, predictable in retrospect, correctable via load redistribution to corridors 4 and 9. Confidence interval on the solution, 94%. The board voted to implement. I sat in my chair near the door and wrote a note on my notepad, and then I stood up and walked to the relay station on sub-level 3 and moved a single pallet of insulation casings from the forward bay to the secondary hold. Nobody asked me to do this. Nobody noticed me do it. I went back to my chair. The Vithori solution took effect. Corridors 4 and 9 absorbed the redistributed load. For approximately 16 hours, everything was fine. Then Corridor 4's pressure coupling failed. The array recalculated. The failure, it determined, was an unanticipated load interaction in the secondary coupling assembly, not in the primary model, but now fully integrated. The solution was to reroute through the tertiary relay chain, bypassing 4 entirely, and to pull emergency supply reserves from the forward depot to cover the gap. Confidence interval, 91%. The board voted. I wrote another note. I walked to sub-level 2 and spent about 12 minutes rearranging the sequencing order for the emergency reserve draw, pulling the thermal units first instead of the nutrient packs, swapping the order of 2 manifold segments before the draw began. No one watched me do this either. I am not a dramatic man. I went back upstairs. The tertiary relay held, for 9 hours. Then the forward depot access flagged a sequencing conflict, and the emergency reserve draw locked up at 34% completion. I heard Vethor Sas make a sound I had not heard him make before. Low, sustained. It was the sound, I would later understand, that Vethori chief modelers make when a confidence interval goes somewhere it has never been. The array was recalculating again. The board was talking over each other in that 3-tone Vithori way that means the conversation has become load-bearing, and there is not enough room for everyone's certainty. 2 junior modelers were pulling error logs. One was rerunning the Corridor 4 data from scratch. Another had the manifold schematics up on the secondary display and was cross-referencing the coupling assembly failure point against 12 prior mission records, looking for a match. There was no match. The confidence interval on the current situation, not the solution, just the current situation, had dropped to 61%. I finished my note. I walked to the depot access terminal on sublevel 1. The sequencing conflict was exactly what I had expected it to be, which was why I had swapped those two manifold segments 9 hours earlier, not to fix the conflict, but to ensure that when it locked up at 34% instead of 12%. The 34% completion gave us enough thermal reserve to keep the survey instruments stable for another 40 hours. At 12%, we would have had 9. I entered 4 commands at the terminal. The depot access unlocked. The draw completed. I went back upstairs and put my notepad on the table and ate a sandwich I had brought from the galley. The board did not immediately notice that the problem had resolved. They were still discussing it. Vethoral Sauce was running a new projection. The junior modeler in the corner was on his 3rd pass through the error logs. I sat in my chair and ate my sandwich and waited, and eventually one of the board members checked the depot status feed and said something in Vethori, and then there was a silence, and then Sauce looked at the feed himself. He looked at it for a while. He asked the board if anyone had authorized a terminal intervention on sublevel 1. Nobody had. He asked if anyone had authorized the manifold sequencing adjustment on sublevel 2. Nobody had. He asked, and this was the one I had been waiting for, if anyone had authorized the insulation casing transfer from the forward bay on day 9. Nobody had. Sauce turned and looked at me. I finished my sandwich. I confirmed that I had made all 3 adjustments, yes. He asked why I had not logged them or reported them to the board. I said they had seemed fairly minor at the time. The post-incident review took 3 days. I was present for parts of it, when they needed me to walk them through the timing and sequence. The core finding, which Vethoral Sauce delivered to the board on the afternoon of the 3rd day in a voice I would describe as carefully level, was as follows. The array's 3 solutions had each failed not because of errors in the array's primary modeling, but because each solution had been implemented in an environment that the array had not modeled, an environment that had been quietly, non-instrumentally adjusted by the human logistics coordinator before each solution took effect. The insulation transfer had altered the load distribution the first failure created. The manifold swap had altered the failure point the second solution was managing. The sequencing adjustment had altered the error state the third solution was navigating. None of these adjustments had been large enough to flag in any monitoring system. None of them had a category in the array. The array's revised confidence interval for the mission window, accounting for the now documented adjustments, 12%. I did not say anything when Sauce read this number. Neither did anyone else for a moment. Sauce asked me then how I had known what to adjust and when. I told him that was a hard question to answer precisely, that after enough time in logistics, supply corridors start to have a feel to them, that you develop a sense for where the small pressure points are, not from instruments, but from the accumulated weight of a lot of decisions that didn't go quite right, and a lot that did, that it wasn't a model, exactly. It was more like a habit. He wrote something down. He looked at it. He wrote something else. The amendment he filed to the mission record recommended that all future joint survey vessels carrying human logistics personnel include a formal intake protocol to document human non-instrumental adjustment activity in real time. Not to constrain it, but to give the array a fighting chance of modeling it. He sent me a copy. I thanked him. I made a note. I have kept doing that for 11 years, and I do not expect to stop.